What's going on?
The entire thing was offensive. Certainly, the comment about the white power was.
I could have guessed they're going to lead off with this.
We could play politics with it, or we can't. I'm not going to. I think it's indefensible. We should take it down. That's what I think.
Just another typical weekend for the President of the United States, tweeting out a white power video before later suggesting he didn't know what was on the tape when the words white power were 8 seconds in, claiming ignorance on a Russian plot to have U.S. troops killed.
I saw 10 seconds of it. They kept playing it over and over. I suspect it was a little longer than that.
Even the British were notified. So really, is the president so addled that they didn't even tell the president of the United States when we're telling our allies?
Well, the president lies, so
The intel community knows about now. They're lying.
It's gonna be weird when he actually tells the truth, because everybody expects him to lie.
This isn't the turn. I don't know what it is. Well, and golfing amid a public health
It's like
crisis.
the boy that cried wolf.
It killed over 125,000 Americans and counting. Infections are surging, with Arizona, Florida, and Texas as the latest epicenters. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Monday, June 29th. With us, we have White House reporter for the Associated Press,
How are you stiffs doing?
former chair of the Republican National Committee, now an MSNBC political analyst, Michael Steele, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of KCBC on Sunday nights, Casey Hunt, and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. Great to have you all with us on this very important Monday morning. The U.S. has gathered intelligence that Russian intelligence officers have offered to pay bounties to Taliban fighters who kill Americans. 3 people briefed on the matter told NBC News. The New York Times first broke the story on Friday, aspects of which have been matched and independently reported by NBC News, the AP, the Washington Post, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, and ABC News. According to the Times, the recovery of large amounts of American cash at a Taliban outpost in Afghanistan helped tip off U.S. officials. But NBC News has not confirmed that the U.S. has verified that any such bounty payments were actually made. According to intel gleaned from U.S. military interrogations of captured militants in recent months, the Washington Post reports that the Russian bounties are believed to have resulted in the deaths of several.
If you look at the history of the Taliban, some people think that they were installed by the CIA. Some people think they guard poppy fields for the U.S. opiates. Some people think they're Russia and partly Russian. All I know is the U.S. has not been able to defeat them in a long, long time, and the U.S. is giving up. They don't exactly look like, you know, like a space-age military force. They look like sort of an extremist group. It's really a shame that the U.S. hasn't been able to conquer them. And the only thing I can imagine is they don't want to conquer them. You know? The military has a lot of pride, and so does the Trump administration. And, you know, I think the objective in Afghanistan and in some other places has been to just control the chaos, like Syria. They don't want a pipeline running from Iran to the sea, which would go through several different countries. So they just want chaos in their country, instability. And that's, I think, all they've wanted in Afghanistan, is instability. They haven't wanted to win the war there. And oddly, some of the people like Taliban, and the Taliban actually control entire towns in some parts. But after they shot the Malala in the head, that was about the time that I said, all right, that's enough. Let's go ahead and shut these guys the door. Hello.
Tells NBC News that the president was never briefed on the issue because there is no consensus.
And they shot the poor girl in the head because she wanted to be educated and go to school, and she lived. I mean, and that's indicative of who these people are. And it's just, you know, if the military existed for a good reason, I would think it would be to get rid of those kinds of people.
going back to what he did in Helsinki, where
You don't want to shit on Facebook
he's
as your
once
lead
again
story?
undercutting
You
US
could cry about them
intel
for a while if you
agencies.
want.
He's once again undercutting a CIA station chief and the findings that they found in Afghanistan, and deciding to go with Vladimir Putin's word that he didn't put a bounty on American soldiers.
Yeah, on the right looks like he's squeezing in a turd.
The president, again, knew about this, according to the reporting, in late March. Here we are in late June, and the president still hasn't even brought it up. Vladimir Putin, who he was calling his good friend.
Anyway, so Rush, his good friend. There you go. He says he's friends with President Z too, and he doesn't look like he's friends with him at all.
It's an extraordinary piece of intelligence, Joe.
But Russia's a regional power. They're not a worldwide power. And these people want to make Russia out to be enterprising, imperialistic, all over the globe, in our face. And they're not. They're a regional power in Asia, mostly in Asia, a little bit in Europe.
There are echoes of Helsinki here. There are echoes of his repeated deference to Vladimir Putin. There's been no retaliation, no warning, no stern message sent to Moscow.
It's pretty clear that Trump wants to do some business in Russia and sees it as a place where he might be able to do business in the future. He wants to keep that door open or something. And he's been real anti, Obama, anti-Democrat, anti-certain kinds of intelligence. So this is right up. This is par for the course for Trump. I've been real skeptical too about some of the U.S. sanctions and crap they do. Like the whole Crimea thing. 95% of the people in Crimea said that they wanted to be part of the Russian Federation and join Russia. And Russia laid all the groundwork there. The pipes, the infrastructure, they did it all. And people villainized Russia up and down, left and right for days because they invaded Crimea. Crimea, however you want to say it. And they needed a seaport, basically, Russia. So the U.S. just has no vision for its enemies. In the U.S.'s capacity, their enemies can all eat dirt and die. All the civilians, they'll sanction them into the Stone Age. They can just all eat shit and go to hell. If that's not real inclusive, then that's not real progressive. Ooh, I said it. Liberals aren't progressive.
So consistent with the way he's behaved in the past, but also so disturbing.
So it would be a little bit like, say, Texas leaving the Union, and then the U.S. going, "No, we want Texas back," and Texas, 95% of Texans saying, "We want to be back, part of the U.S." And the U.S. going down there and saying, "All right, we're taking you back. You're part of the U.S. again."
But he's just gotten word, or he got word in March from his.
Or maybe Texas isn't a good perfect analogy. Maybe there's a coastal state, South Carolina or something, where that analogy would be even more applicable.
And this is what Donald Trump said on May the 8th, a couple of months later. We have this great.
But see, a lot of the Democrat states have military in their state, and military want new equipment. Military want all kinds of things. So by supporting a war against some other boogeyman, it gives the industrial military complex the money and the impetus they need to continue their war machine.
Everybody to be so stupid to believe that you have one of the most serious pieces of intel to come across a president's desk at a time he's trying to invite him to the G7. At a time he's continuing to say that Russia's a good friend of his, and they're not going to tell the president. That either suggests that he is so addled and mentally deficient that they didn't think it was worth their time telling him, or that he's a source of the Russians and that they couldn't trust him. There's no other good explanation of why you wouldn't tell the president that the leader of Russia is putting bounties on the heads of young American troops.
So I will take up that challenge and say that they did brief him. I do not believe that something as important and as severe as this was left untold to the President of the United States. What I think is disturbing is his reaction to it once he was told. The fact that there has been nothing done, there has been no rebuke officially from the United States, and the fact that the White House, even over the course of the President's tweets, still has not denied the underlying intelligence, that this is in fact what happened and this is in fact what we do know. And the reality of it is, the President tweets that this is, something to make Republicans look bad. No, this is something that makes you look bad.
These guys sound like a bunch of babies by not really reading between the lines and asking the right questions. They just go off on tangents about tweets and Trump and Russia. I mean, grow up. God damn.
You are the commander-in-chief. All right? So if this is
They really like to just gossip, pretty much. Small minds talk about other people. Big minds talk about ideas.
Who now find out that you are okay with a bounty on their head by our adversary. So this is what he's going to have to account for. You can't spin this out now. There may be some Republicans who will run to his defense. That'll be curious to watch.
It's sad.
Right?
That's sad.
I mean, come
It's
on.
just sad.
There's got to be a line. Casey Hunt, Liz Cheney has some pretty good questions about this, and she was tweeting over the weekend. She's one Republican who wants to know why weren't the president or vice president briefed?
They were.
Was it in the presidential daily briefing?
Yep.
Who knew and when? What has been done in response to protect our forces and hold Putin accountable? What say the Republicans at this point, Casey Hunt? Are they so morally worn down by this
Are they
president
talking to
that
you
they
yet?
will not have the
Last time I
right
saw
answer
her
for
trying
the
to talk to
United States
Republicans,
of
they
America?
blew her off and walked right by her.
Well, Mika, we obviously have to put that question to Republicans,
Yeah.
and I think that third
Good
piece
luck.
of what Liz Cheney underscores there, what is being
Got McConnell
done
the nutsack.
is a question that, every lawmaker
I
has
heard
the
that
duty
Mitch
to
McConnell was a
answer now that
descendant
they
of
are
a Confederate
aware and
soldier, so I looked that up,
this
and
is
it's
going
true.
on. I mean, we're still trying to figure out
So I think that might be one reason why
maybe
Trump has been
Congress
protecting
knew
monuments
why
and statues of
why they
Confederates.
talked to them or not. My colleague Ken Delanian has some reporting that congressional officials were perhaps briefed. But
Apparently,
he
McConnell
says
said he was
that
okay with
happened
renaming the
today.
military
We're still trying
installations,
to nail down
and
all
changing the
those
name of
details.
the
But
10 Army
the reality of this
bases that
story,
are
and
named after Confederate
it just
leaders.
underscores that there really is no
But
good
who
answer
knows?
for the president if he didn't know,
Sometimes
because
people
his
like him
intelligence officials were afraid
say the
to bring
opposite
it
of
up
what
to
they
him,
mean because
underscore
they
it,
know
they
it doesn't
weren't
matter,
sure if he would approve,
and they don't
one of
need
the
to say the
options that they
truth
had
that
on
might
the
be
table,
unpopular
and at the
because the
time,
president already
it
said he's going to
reported
veto
that
it.
there were various
So
potential
McConnell could
options
say anything he
discussed.
wants to say.
I mean,
It doesn't
that's a
even
theme
matter.
that's come up in this
President isn't
presidency,
going to
that
let
he
it go
hasn't
through.
been willing to take actions that are presented to him by his intelligence, or he's doubted the information underneath it. So perhaps that's part of what happened.
Kind of like voting for a Republican in
There
California.
is no good
You can vote for
explanation. Any
Trump,
one of
you can
these
vote for Mickey
kind of
Mouse,
rabbit holes you go down
vote for
has its
Donald
own
Duck.
set, of
But
landmines
the
and
Democrat
enormous
candidate
problems
is going to
for this
win in
president. And I
California
think the fact that
because
you
there's a
had
lot more
Liz
Democrats
Cheney,
there
who
than
has
Republicans.
shown a willingness throughout this administration to push back against the president on matters of national security, and trust me, liberal Democrats don't agree with Liz Cheney or, many other members of her family, and that's kind of understating the issue on some of this stuff. But there are a lot of Republicans who have been in that camp historically, and, I do think that this is something that is going to put an incredible amount of pressure on them, and it is one more thing, as, there are so many other issues that they have to grapple with this president, and his poll numbers are falling, the trend lines are terrible for him, and to have this sort of very clear-cut
See his wife on the
moral
pole.
issue that
Hey.
talks about the men and women that are still on the ground in Afghanistan fighting for us every day. The president has potentially known about this for months, and he does nothing to protect them. That is trying to answer those questions and defend this president is a very, very difficult position to be in. So if that's what's going to happen, I think those contortions will be pretty obvious.
Well, think about that. If you're a parent that have a son or a daughter in Afghanistan. And the commander-in-chief has known for months that Vladimir Putin and the Russians have put a bounty on their head to have them killed by Islamic militants. And the President of the United States,
He did drop a Moab on him, didn't he?
and it's considered so serious that the National Security Council convenes in March to consider sanctions or at least a diplomatic scolding and trying to figure out what actions to take. And 3 months later,
And Russia says they're not in Ukraine,
no actions have yet to be
so
taken.
it's going to be different. You know, you believe them or you don't. Apparently, some of the equipment that the military is using to fight Ukraine and take some of the land looks like it's Russian-made equipment, so maybe Russia sold it to them. Or maybe it is Russia.
Who's in Afghanistan?
Maybe it's not. You know?
And this is
The U.S. sometimes just assumes it's right and goes off of that. They don't care what anybody else says. They don't care what's trying to go through the proper channels or proving it. They'll just assume, say something, assume they're right, try to get some of their buddies to go along with them, and then take action based on their assumption.
The president's doing nothing. This is considered so serious by our intelligence agencies that they convene a meeting at the end of March, and we notify. Our government notifies the British government.
Guess you better readers. Let's read this stuff.
That
This
there
guy's
are
getting
also
old.
bounties on the heads of British soldiers from Vladimir Putin.
They've got intelligence officers. Can't they get the same intel?
The White House wants you to believe that despite the fact that CIA knew it, despite the fact that the President's own National Security Council knew it, despite the fact that it was so serious that they convened a meeting in March to consider a range of options to take against the Russian government and Vladimir Putin for putting bounties on the heads of young American troops.
You know, you beat the Taliban and then you wave to Russia and say,
Despite the fact
oh
it was
well,
considered
guess
so
it didn't work.
serious,
We beat them. How about that option? Has anybody thought about doing that maybe?
British,
Winning the war that we came there to fight and then fuck these bounties and fuck the bounty hunter people that put the bounties out.
British government. But they didn't.
Bountiers? What do you call them if you put a bounty out?
Now, I just
You're
asked,
just a faith-filled scapegoating motherfucker. Jesus Christ. You should really try to. You should see a doctor, man.
and how low does the president think he can take you and his supporters?
He's just trying to get military votes for the
A
Democrats.
president who was told
He's trying to shame conservative military right now.
briefing months ago that the man that he called a friend of his in May was putting bounties on the heads of U.S. troops.
Maybe. Maybe not. But you know what? If they win that war and get the hell out of there, then the bounty doesn't really matter.
It is just mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing why it takes over a decade to
And
lose the
here's
war
the thing, it's all
to
going
a
to come
bunch
out.
of
The
Muslims
truth is all going to come out.
in the
There are
desert
going to be people testifying before Congress.
that aren't even part of the country.
They've got the presidential daily briefs. They have the intel. It's all going to come out. So, Republican senators pick sides, and there are only two sides to figure, by the way. There are only two sides to figure. This isn't about being a Republican or a Democrat, a Trump supporter or a Trump opponent. You can pick the side of U.S. troops, or you can pick the side of Vladimir Putin. There's no gray zone here. You can't stick your head under the covers and pretend that Donald Trump's just going to.
They're all a bunch of goddamn liars.
Yes, he is. He's going to get voted out. You think he is. So you think I can hold him? No, you can't hold him for 6 months. Speak out.
It's like, which liars do you want to believe? Want to believe these liars or those liars?
Today. Charlie, the latest report from the New York Times is.
Well, are there any other wars that you want us to go fail?
Information is that
Scarborough?
actually with bounties on their head were actually killed. Can you?
Maybe we could lose the lollipop guild next time.
Tell us where you're going.
Maybe we could fight the Girl Scouts and lose to them.
That's certainly
How about Mexico? Do you want to go lose in Mexico? You could fight Cuba and lose to Cuba.
We're the first to say that troops were actually believed to have been killed under this. We had previously reported that bounties had been collected, which is sort of 95% of the way there. And we have subsequently confirmed that, yes, there are several incidents that they have been looking at as part of this whole process that was going on behind closed doors since the first part of this year, and trying to tease out what was going on here. And
this reminds me a little bit of the alleged Russian plot to poison somebody in the UK, and they pretty quickly blamed it on Russia and Putin without any evidence. And I was pretty upset with their prime minister for doing that, because they seemingly went off of U.S. intelligence. And there was a lab there in the UK that could have made the same kind of poison. And they were trying to act like it was unique to Russia and it had to have been Russia. Skripal guy or something like that. Research that if you have time. That was a big ordeal a few years ago. And the people that they poisoned, they didn't actually die. At least not both of them. And then they had a relative trying to get more information and get one of them out of there and visit them, and they weren't letting her. And it was a big charade. It was poorly reported on in the U.S. And the U.S. jumped to its conclusion and stuck with it. And the UK, lapdog UK said, oh yeah, Russia's fault. These people look awfully sane and even-handed and mature when the U.S. acts like this. The Venezuelas, the Chinas, the Russias, they look like the calm, cool, collected ones. And the U.S. looks like a chicken running around with its head cut off in these sorts of situations. I agree. Your tweets don't matter. I don't read them. That's for damn sure.
First of all, in this video, it opens very quickly. It's very loud. The words are very clear. And the words white power, yeah, white power, 8 seconds in.
President Trump is in such a horrible position in the polls that now I think he's just acting like a child trying to get negative attention. And he thinks that, ruffling the liberals' feathers makes his base happy and proud of him and grows his constituency. But I don't think it does. I think a lot of them cringe and a lot of them hate it.
So if he did not get the depth of the exchange, then what did he retweet it for? You don't retweet things unless you're trying to project some reason to retweet it. So it is obvious on his face that he heard it and that he intended to send a signal to.
The guy who made Twitter is laughing right now. Look at these people talking about tweets.
In the midst of this movement around social justice, around systemic racism, where the president has had political laryngitis and even addressing the issue of systemic racism, even addressing what happened with George Floyd, he would choose to retweet white power while whites and blacks are marching all over this country trying to get the country to come to terms with it. He would retweet white power video on a day.
That's politics, man. Trump has 5% of the black vote. So I think he just looks at blacks as Democrats.
To try and somehow feed into the American consciousness through his base supporters that it's all right to yell white power. So I think the timing of this and the fact he's the president of the United States of America is what's so alarming. We expect this from any normal bigot, but
Yeah.
for the head of state to do this on a day and in a time like this is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and Rev, Joe, it just shows the White House response
How
to
about
this,
Florida?
the
Jesus.
president's response to this.
Florida should take some of the
So
blame.
obviously,
This person was in Florida riding in a golf cart past people screaming with signs, and some old man shouts white power. Okay. What the hell? And now that idiot makes national news? Jesus Christ.
Well, they're going to peel back the onion.
And then he deleted it, so what do you want from him? Yeah, he tweeted it and then he deleted it. Alright, so he's an idiot. Nothing you didn't know already.
This long video, it's the first thing you see on this video, a guy shouting white power.
It's only the first thing because that's when people have been playing that part of the video. If you play the whole video, I bet there was a little more to it.
Only took this down after getting criticized by Republican Senator Tim Scott. He never even addressed the criticism until Tim Scott went on national television, the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate, and even Tim Scott could not defend this, and he said it was offensive and it should be taken down. And then 3 hours later, the president takes it down. But again, with all that is going on that the president has not addressed,
Florida,
including boycotting of Facebook for talking about postings of hate stuff, the president would retweet this in the face of this. The reason I'm emphasizing the climate from the Mississippi vote to Facebook to what's going on.
no, look at, they're not even talking about what the hell's going on in Florida. That seems like the news right there. What the hell was that video all about? What were these people doing out there? Why is this guy saying white power in Florida? Who the hell is that guy? You got one idiot retweeting another idiot, and that's news, huh?
Well, and Jonathan Lemire, this is just,
Jesus.
again, this is in line with what he's been doing over, well, you could say the last 3.5 years.
I lived in Florida for 4 months in 2018, and it was a very interesting place. I had visited once or twice before, and I kind of moved there sight unseen to Coconut Grove area, and I really liked it a lot. It was awesome. The weather reminded me of Hawaii, but there's dust. There's like this dust stuff that was in the air that was made it a little different. And now we're seeing that African dust, the Saharan dust coming from Africa, going across the Atlantic Ocean and going all over the country on the eastern side. You know, stick in a search engine, type the words Florida man and see what comes up. And it pulls up all kinds of crazy stories. I wonder if that dust has anything to do with causing Floridians to act eccentric. Because they sure do. A lot of crazy shit happens in Florida. Everything from bear attacks to sinkholes to bridges falling to mass school shootings to lizards freezing and falling out of trees. On and on and on.
You're right, Joe. I mean, obviously questions have been swirling prior to June 1st on his handling of the
Coconut Grove is part of Miami, and I liked it there. And I also visited the Everglades and Key West. It was awesome.
There's been some sort of real blowback to the president, and a lot of it has been of his own doing, seemingly self-destructing politically in front of our very eyes. And that includes, just in the last week or so, the debacle that was the Tulsa rally. These questions, of course, questions that will remain about his relationship with Vladimir Putin and these bounties on American soldiers, and now this video, which again echoes previous moments where he has given at least
people are like children,
if not more, to very racist sentiments. Charlottesville,
as long as they agree with each other and don't really say anything that's out of their narrative,
time and again,
they're proud of themselves.
Here, this is going to send a disturbing signal to those suburban voters. Let's remember the White House in the campaign thought they'd make a play for African American voters this time around, and that that seems like that ship has now more or less sailed. And
Yep.
Michael Steele, I wanted to go to you with this as well. I mean, this image the claim is almost preposterous. That the president
Apparently, Trump got
hates,
8% of the black vote, I think,
but I also just want to focus on where this
and
happened.
Romney got 6% when he ran, apparently, and Trump's down to 5% now.
Last time around, voted for President Trump at an extraordinary amount. He cleaned up there.
Apparently, blacks make up 13% of America, and Democrats really want their votes right now, obviously. And some people say they could swing the election, but they have poor voter turnout apparently a lot of times. They came out and voted for Obama, but didn't come out as strongly for Clinton. And I think that's why black people have been in the news so much, and MSNBC and CNN and on, anti-Trump, whatever, because they want to make sure that these African Americans get out there and vote for Joe Biden. And these people are so predictable.
He knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to find ways to recoalesce this base. It's fractured in places that he cannot afford to have it fractured among seniors, among some core Republicans. He dropped from 95% to 84%. You're seeing.
All right, I'm gonna check another station out because this is getting mind-numbing. That guy's just reading real fast. Probably gave him the wrap-up sign. We'll do CNN next. CNN and Fox News are on commercials. So. Yeah, if anybody just listens or watches like one of these shows and not all of them, and if they don't also get their news at some other places, they don't know what the hell's going on. And I pity them, If all you ever watch is MSNBC or Fox or CNN, you don't have a clue what's going on in the country. You've got to read news. Like on YouTube, I watch a bunch of news. I'm subscribed to Newsy, Al Jazeera, NBC, I think, and CBS, and RT, and several other news sources. And they're more independent, and they're not all just lefty mainstream medias, Because I don't want to hear just people that agree with me or think like I think, although nobody probably does. I want to know the truth.
New controversy after President Trump's
Hey.
retweet of a video showing his
Oh,
supporters
Jesus
shouting
Christ.
white power. The president
Going on
thanked
this
people,
nonsense?
great people in the video.
At least they didn't lead with this crap.
Deleted it.
It took them 40 minutes to get to this.
Reporter for Axios and CNN political
She was just on
commentator.
MSNBC.
He's the author of
Oh,
Memoir
Jesus
My
Christ.
Vanishing
I'm not
Country.
watching this
So
again. You guys are
Dan,
issues.
Fox News contributor, former NYPD officer Dan Bongino. Dan, the headline of the New York Post editorial board is "Fresh Signs: New York City is spiraling out of control." Do you see the same thing?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, it's not like this hasn't happened before, right? I mean, anybody who was a New York City resident in the Ed Koch, David Dickens mayorships there, I saw this. I mean, thousands of people murdered a year on the streets of New York City. And again, anyone can look this up on the internet. It's out there for you to see. I know liberals have a tough time with history and all. They may want to check that out. Now, listen, we can argue as a country, and we should, about public policy and things like taxes and things like that. And the chance are, Brian, if one side, the conservatives, lose the argument, it's probably not going to result in your immediate death or anything like that, thankfully. That's not the case with arguments about policing. When you attack the police, depolice neighborhoods, and outrageously argue to defund the police, people will literally die. Not figuratively, again, not some kind of fairy tale movie kind of way. Like in the real world, real people will lose their kids. And there's so much going on right now with this. It's not just one thing. And it's the abandonment of broken windows policing, which I know you know about. You know, aggressive policing. I don't mean physically aggressive. I mean aggressive in that they're pulling criminals off the street. The abandonment of that. I mean, this is going to get a lot worse, and it's a real shame because good people are going to get really hurt by this.
Sure, and you know, Dan, when you look at the violence in the streets and the lawlessness with you know, vandalizing these statues and pulling down
make the
public
places more
property, and
dangerous.
the guy we just did a story a little bit ago about a guy
There's got to be a balance.
hooked up a rope to his truck, and the Ten Commandments statue pulled that down. He's been arrested. This is an election year issue, ultimately. When you look at what happened in Congress last week, where the Democrats stopped the Republican Senate bill, and then the Democrats passed something that absolutely has zero chance of passing in the Republican Senate, people will have a binary choice in November, won't they?
Yeah, and Steve, it's not like that hasn't happened before either. While we're on the whole history note, I mean, we've had presidential elections in the late '60s flip entirely on the law and order issue. It's not complicated. You know, history books have been written about this kind of thing.
I mean, Fox is sort of a, in my opinion, Fox offsets CNN and MSNBC, just like the Republicans offset the Democrats. Without Fox, without the Republicans, the Democrats would just go ape. They'd go crazy. This would be all left nation. He's liberal as a $3 bill. I don't know if that's a saying, but so as much as I don't like either of the two political parties, at least they offset each other. I got a lot of criticism from both of them, and a lot of the way they do stuff, and I want to know more than they tell me all the time. At least it's something.
I'm going to do something else instead. I don't need this job to be attacked by de Blasio all day. Thanks.
So, Dan, to that point, 272 officers retiring between May 25th and June 23rd of this year.
Yeah.
That's a 49% increase since the same time last year. When Steve was reading that intro to you, and he was talking about how cops were responding to a shooting, shots were fired, and they went there, and then all these bottles are thrown at them. Nowadays, if you were still on the force, what would go through your mind if you got one of those calls and you knew you had to go there?
I mean, everyone's going to have to go with backup. In each individual precinct and borough, we had task forces. You know, I was in Brooklyn North in the 7-5 precinct. There was a task force.
That's just
Can
wild.
you imagine if every job you go to, God forbid,
The
a
people
shooting,
would attack the cops.
a rape, a domestic violence,
I'm pretty sure it's a felony, and they're not going to get away with it. That's part of the problem, I think, is sometimes these police have been attacked, and they've been talking about the attacks, but they haven't shown the end result of the attack. And they showed like a cop getting hit and kicked in New York and then people running off. Or they reported that cops were attacked. But if they show them running, chasing down the people that attacked them and arresting them, that might go a long way with some of these people that are attacking cops.
More retiring, people are not signing up.
Absolutely. I just had a friend down who just retired.
Because they do. They take it very personally. They look after for their own.
He was going to stay. And you know how much experience is being lost? He was a gang officer. He had experience with gangs. He could look at tattoos, figure out who knew each other. And you know what? He's gone now. Gone. You could have had him for 5 more years. Peak experience. Now he's in the wind, and you're going to see hundreds more doing the same thing. It is, I'm telling you.
It's just not worth it, yeah. I remember discussing career options when I was a kid, and we talked about a cop, but it was just too hard, too dangerous, too crazy of a job, too emotional, too just, you know, it's like being in the military. You gotta be born for it, and eat it and drink it, and more than anything, or just forget it.
I think we should disband police unions. They do a lot of good things as well, keeping quotas out of policing and policing for profit.
But I do like the idea of 911 not always having a cop come, you know. Sometimes 911 is not the right number for the cops. You know, the cops don't have to come to every 911 call. Sometimes a counselor or somebody else could come. Because the cops tend to use force, and, you know.
Yes, that's right. Good morning. So today, the 4 former Minneapolis police officers charged in George Floyd's death are due back in court. Derek Chauvin will appear remotely from jail, charged with second-degree murder. The other three accused of aiding and abetting second-degree murder and manslaughter are expected to appear in person. All four could enter pleas. A Texas sheriff running for Congress claims a postal worker dumped his campaign flyers in the trash. Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Nels posting this video on Twitter. It shows a driver getting out of a truck and throwing something in the dumpster. The sheriff then tweeting this picture of a flyer he says was found inside. He's calling on the Postal Service to investigate. They have not commented on the claims. The first NBA player to test positive for coronavirus is still dealing with side effects 3 months later. Rudy Gobert telling a French magazine his sense of smell still hasn't fully recovered. But the Utah Jazz player intends to play when the season resumes at the end of July in Orlando. Gobert, as you probably recall, is known for jokingly touching all of the press mics after a March interview.
Oh, geez, that guy. That guy's an idiot.
Just days later.
Huh. Maybe they gave him the placebo to treat it.
For law enforcement amid the pandemic.
That guy is one of the biggest idiots of the year.
Ribbons at several police precincts as part of their Operation Blue Ribbon initiative.
Our local department came around and supported us with parades and clapping and cheering. It really meant a lot to us. So we decided COVID is getting crazy right now here in Arizona, so we need to show our
Scottsdale's a rich community in Arizona.
Heroes that supported us.
The Grand Canyon State seeing nearly 4,000 new cases Sunday. So look your headlines. I'll send it back to you.
I met one guy in Israel
Thank you very much.
from the United States, and he lived in Scottsdale. And I was in San Diego, and when I came back, I went over there and visited
Hey, good
him.
morning, guys.
Very nice city.
It's going to be some extreme heat over the next couple of days, piling up in the middle of the country and then stretching a little farther out
On the
west.
grid.
That bringing us an elevated risk of critical fire danger. That's an area you're looking at across New Mexico into Arizona. It's going to be very, very dry. That with some dry lightning. Gusty conditions could lead to wildfires before it's all said and done. So that's going to be an area we're paying attention to. Otherwise, it is that very extreme heat I was talking about, especially in the northern plains. You're looking at temperatures running up into the 90s. The heat indices are going to be getting up into around 105 degrees, and you're looking at temperatures the 90s getting close to triple digits across a very large area. So, yeah, we're getting into the holiday weekend, guys, and it is going to be feeling like summer across the entire country.
Some will say it actually is something, right?
Some would say that. Yeah, they would.
Thanks, Adam.
God bless America.
Yeah.
4th of July this weekend. Thanks, Adam. All right, the Minneapolis City Council voting to dismantle the police department, but they're also getting private security paid with taxpayer dollars. A former officer turned congressman sounds off next.
For what it's worth, some of these places with the worst violence are Democrat cities and states. I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's a correlation. All I know is that Minneapolis, has a Democratic mayor. They've got Democratic senator, at least one, and New York City, Democratic mayor, Democratic governor. I can't list every one in every place right now, but like New Jersey's got a Democratic governor. Some of the places that were hit the worst with COVID-19, or at least hit first, were Democrat areas. And some of this police violence, the worst violence, has been in Democratic areas. So that's, who knows why? Maybe it's because they say that African Americans live in poorer areas, make less money, and they vote Democrat. And then the police treat them a certain way. And they treat the police a certain way. And then it ends up leading to violence. But I know full well that because I was abused by the LAPD, that you cannot do, there's an instance, at least one, that you cannot do a damn thing wrong whatsoever and they'll still abuse you. Because that happened to me. So, and I don't give a shit what you think or say. but that's the God's honest truth. And you might say, "Ah, well, he probably did something. Probably said something." No, I did absolutely nothing. Said absolutely nothing. Was charged with absolutely nothing. And these people abused me. So, and these were white people. So, I know for a fact that they can abuse anybody. So, I don't hate all cops. But I don't trust all cops either. You know. Now when I see cops, I move slowly and put my hands where they can see them. And I was taught to be respectful to cops, and I always have been. But sometimes it just doesn't matter. I think some of these places with the riots and the worst protests against the cops are places that have had run-ins with bad cops. You saw it in Los Angeles, and that kind of verified that to me because I was abused in Los Angeles. So that led me to believe that the other places that were protesting police brutality might have had experiences with police brutality. And that's one reason that made me so upset when I hear about the Minneapolis one where they just blame it on race automatically. Because it's not necessarily a race thing. They don't give a shit about the color of your skin. They'll hurt you if they want to and if they think they can get away with it. If you're poor, then you're vulnerable.
After advancing a measure to abolish their police departments, Minneapolis council members are now sending thousands of taxpayer dollars per day to hire their own private security. You believe this? In fact, Fox News is confirming the city has spent $63,000 in just the past 3 weeks. Our next guest is a former police officer of 23 years. That's a message for the defund police movement. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Pete Stauber, former police officer, as I mentioned. Congressman, what is your message for the defund police? Which is happening?
Well, I think, Brian, that's hypocrisy at its best, right? City council.
No, the sheriff trying to serve a sheriff that conveniently can't find the sheriff. That's probably hypocrisy at its worst. That happened to me.
And I think Minneapolis, the business owners and the citizens have some grave concerns on what's happening in the beautiful city of Minneapolis.
So, try to wrap your head around this. You are trying to get better policing, better law enforcement by giving them
I heard the winters are
money
cold.
and less tools, and the first thing usually cut back is training.
Well, I think that you need to invest in your police department, and that's invest in the best practices, transparency, accountability.
I read a disturbing stat the other day, and it said that 49.6% of Americans are obese.
And that starts with leadership at the top.
It's just mind-boggling. Not overweight, not just can lose a few pounds, but obese. Half of America is obese. Jesus Christ. There's 330 million people in America, so that means 100 and...
And that's something that sticks with you, but you're still into service, obviously.
65 million people in America are obese. They can't stop eating. They eat too much.
Metropolitan areas have suffered $400 million from rioting and looting. So what do we learn from this? Where do we go from here?
That's the saddest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
We are a nation of law and order where our republic was established by laws. And I think that the lawlessness that's happening, the rioting, the disrespect for one another has to stop. Mob rule does not take over this country. And I think that's a dangerous precedent. And there's a lot of people standing up to that. We have the ability in this country to look forward.
I started gaining some weight that fast. I stopped eating. I stopped eating last month for 17 days.
That's what we need to strive for.
Exactly, because the lawlessness is not
Might have
going
been
to
this
go
month.
anywhere, but it might give everyone an
I don't
idea
know.
of what's going to be happening unless you reverse it.
No, I think it was last month. In quarantine, the days kind of run together, but I took 17 days off of food, and it was great. And I lost weight and got control of my diet, and I felt great. You know, the Bible says when you fast, That's all you really need to know.
And how much the Trump administration has
If you're a
to
Christian,
do in order to
then
get back
how in the hell could you be
attention.
obese?
Get another 4 years
The
in
Bible
White House.
says in plain English, when you
More about
fast.
this story about Russians paying Taliban to assassinate our men and women over in Afghanistan. We'll talk about all that and more in the next 2 hours. Don't move.
But this will be a safe thing to enter at all. I mean, and setting aside, I mean, we have seen those pictures from the rallies. The president himself refuses to wear a mask. I'm not saying that these things will all happen, but is it even possible to make it safe?
No. I mean, you're asking for nirvana for them to act like it's perfect, and it won't be. And so even with mask wearing, there
He's
is
obese.
a small amount of transmission.
Well, that's not. I'm not making fun of him.
And
He's
I just
literally
am
obese.
concerned that even if they do all the best things, that with that many people, that's a lot of people for even a half.
He's setting an unhealthy example with his body, with the way he is. Hello. And half of America is following it.
Why can't the Republicans do that? And I just want to be clear here. We don't care which convention it is or whatever. It's just there shouldn't be a convention putting all those people together.
That's one thing that impresses me about Joe Biden is he's maintained a lean body. I don't know how he's done it. I'd like to hear about it. Hello, watching the news. You know, some people get their stomach tied, or they get liposuction, or whatever. Some people have to suspiciously lose weight all of a sudden. Good. Just watching the news. All three stations are on a commercial right now. MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News. Just made some comments. If you wanted to hear it, you can play the video back. I'm going to stop here in a minute. Just talking a little bit about obesity. My mom was obese the last, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years of her life. And she got a knee replacement and had a bunch of complications from it. And if my dad would have passed away first, I would have moved back with her and helped her to get on a health program to lose her weight and eat healthy and be healthier. But she passed away in surgery when she was 66 back in 2017. So that didn't work out. But, you know, being obese, I was saying half of America, I read a statistics that 49.6% of Americans are obese. And, you know, obesity causes all kinds of health problems. Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I was real sad and upset about that. I think she could have lived another 10 years. Yeah.
Wherever it's indicated. Businesses don't comply, and people don't comply. And we may have to look at some dramatic measures that we don't want to look at.
I'll watch CNN for a few more minutes and see what they're talking about and make a few more comments before I quit. There's 5, 10 more minutes or so. They kind of repeat these three news stations at the top of the hour. MSNBC is sometimes introduces a new story or two, but and so does Fox. But CNN is a little more repetitious.
So this morning, nearly 126,000 Americans have died from coronavirus, and in some ways,
yeah, it
the
was.
situation is worse than it's ever
They
been.
screwed up so
The
bad.
average number of new cases nationwide at its highest level yet. Look at that.
They made like 4 major mistakes that led to her
31
death.
That's more than half the country seeing an increase.
Put her
in
colostomy
cases.
bag
All
on
the states
upside
are red,
down,
going up. Just 4
and
states,
then
the
they
ones in green,
gave her an
even more
antibiotic she was
cases seeing an
allergic
increase.
to.
How bad is this?
They accidentally cut one of her organs. I think it was her small intestine, and sewed her back up. And she caught a super bug in the hospital while she was there. And had to have another round of antibiotics for an extra week. And it was just too much for her to take, all that.
Today, 10 states were dropping that, including Texas, by the way. They were dropping on Memorial Day. Right now, the cases skyrocketing in that state.
And the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr.
They're lucky that I was in Hawaii when this happened in San Diego, or I would have beat the doctor's face.
And wearing masks, which is fueling the current surge. Dr. Fauci gives some states a grade of C for their handling of the pandemic, and says Americans have a societal responsibility to not be part of the problem.
What has happened?
Yeah, you would think, but my dad sent me a copy. He emailed me everything as it happened, and it was a horrible circumstance, seeing it all happen day by day. But one thing he sent me was what she signed. She basically signed away her rights to sue. Basically said that if this happens, if she dies, they really cover their ass. It was in Grossmont Hospital in La Mesa, California, same hospital where I was born. So they make, before surgery, a lot of times they make you sign something that says, like, if they screw up and you die, you can't sue them. And so sometimes you can't sign away certain rights. So I thought it was debatable. Maybe we could try, but my dad didn't want to, and it was too hard for me to try to do it from Hawaii.
Of community spread was even more confounding. Is that when you have a community-based outbreak, like going on right now in several states, Florida, California, Texas, Arizona, etc., what you're seeing is community-based spread, where 20 to 40%.
So tell your loved ones you love them.
Don't have any symptoms.
Don't take them for granted.
Classic paradigm of identification, isolation, contact tracing doesn't work, no matter how good you are, because you don't know who you're tracing. They're out there, they don't even know that they're infected. So, as I mentioned,
I don't think we're doing very well. We're not. Yeah, the contact tracing has been real poor.
Is completely blanketing these communities.
But I was saying, with a Republic, I think Republicans and Democrats are both extreme, and we get the one extreme with Republicans, and that spills over to contact tracing. They don't want to be traced. They want their civil rights. They don't want to wear masks. And if we had a Democratic administration in office, I think we'd have all kinds of contact tracing, all kinds of championing mask wearing, and it would be very different. Getting paid, paying businesses, paying people to stay home. It would be a little more palatable, this whole crazy pandemic response.
Looking at this map comparison, and I think it is so instructive. Memorial Day on your right, that is the states in the country that we're seeing.
But it might be a little over the top too. If they start using contact tracing information to arrest people with stupid outstanding warrants for jaywalking that turned into a warrant or something, then that might be a little over the top.
We're going to look back at June as another month that we will regret in the United States.
Same thing with facial recognition. That can kind of be abused too.
Yeah, and we started to reopen too early without the basic measures in place that were part of these gating.
I don't think Republicans are going to be in office a whole lot longer. I think Democrats and others are going to slowly but surely take over. And so things are going to go that way more and more.
We would be in a much different place. Two things jumped
I
out.
think Trump is a big problem for the whole Republican